Hi, this is Rich, and I'm back with episode number 5 in the weather routing video series that I'm doing. I'm again going to start with the Isobar map on PredictWind zoomed way out and just get an overall look at what's going on, looking at the ECMWF model. So there's a lot of unsettled air here as the South Pacific Convergence Zone comes further south, and we don't really want to sail through that. So we're all the way up to Sunday. It's still pretty bad. It starts to clear out now Monday. Wind's a little bit strong. And Tuesday it's looking pretty good. So that looks like a possibility. This low down here is a little bit problematic, and it's going to be kicking up some big seas still. But let's do a routing and see what happens. The other thing I want to do before we do that, though, is I want to look at PWG, because when I did a routing earlier, that low on PWG was definitely an issue. Okay, here it is. Again, the instability from the South Pacific Convergence Zone around NewCal. And then that low forms further north on PWG, which affects the seas a lot more. Pretty strong down here. 40 knots there. Ooh, 50 knots right down here. Aiming swells at NewCal. And then it even moves a little bit west before heading off to the east. So that's something to keep an eye on. Okay, I'm going to go down to Tools, Weather Routing. Here's my route to Gladstone, and I'm going to have it leave Tuesday at about noon. All right, here's PWG. Just looking across that. Wind looks good. It's on the beam. It's a little strong. I'm actually mainly concerned about waves at this point, now the motor's running. Let's look at ECMWF. Wind's good, it's on the beam, a little lighter than PWG was. Actually, can avoid motoring here, I think. Now maybe motoring. And now we get into that extended data. Looks pretty interesting. Let's go look at the tables. We can see that wind is mostly below 20 knots or below, with the exception of PWE, which gets up a little higher. A little bit of rain here, but let's look at the Cape. It's still only 40 joules per kilogram. That's not so bad. I don't think we really have to worry until it gets up to about 1,000. And here's the wave height. Again, the PWG, the blue one, seems like the outlier here. PWE is a little high as well, but ECMWF and the others are way down around 3 meters. As Cindy reminded me today, when there's one model that is an outlier that isn't conforming to the others, it's always suspect. I mean, maybe it's right, but usually not. Wave period, but this is going to get better here, this wave data. Okay, current speed goes up to a knot, but it's with us, it's against us, it's with us, it's against us. Now we get into this new data. You'll remember that a while back, I calculated the steepness factor from the period and wave height. I was talking to PredictWind about that, actually suggesting that they incorporate something like that, and they told me they've gone way beyond that. They've been working a lot on wave data, and they've come up with some really amazing stuff that I'll show you here. It's on the Pro version, and here's some of this new wave data in tabular format. Influence on wave polar. You see that at the very beginning of the trip, it must be going into the waves because it really knocks the speed down to 0. And then the waves are actually helping, increasing the polar speeds. Here's the next thing they've done is this roll incidence and how much the boat is rolling. To get technical, this is the root mean squared value of roll. So it's kind of an average roll factor. They say less than 4 degrees is the number where you can comfortably perform tasks and don't get seasick. You'll see that PWG and PWE exceed that 4 degrees at the very beginning of the trip, and then it looks like one of them exceeds it again just briefly at the end of the trip, but the others are below the 4-degree magic number. Vertical acceleration is the G-force pushing against you, essentially, as the boat accelerates upwards. And in excess of 0.2 Gs is where performing tasks gets difficult. So you see, again, it's only one of the PW models that exceeds the 0.2. The other models are comfortably down here below 0.1. And slamming incidence is the likelihood the boat will slam into the waves at least once a minute. They say a slamming incidence of 50% is excessive. Where those numbers come from? Well, they're in a help article that I'll cite here. You can find out how to set up the routing using wave polars. It has a great detailed explanation. And down here, it talks about what these numbers mean. A vertical acceleration limit of 0.2 g is often used for safely performing tasks and avoiding seasickness. A roll of 4 degrees is often used for safely moving around the boat and completing tasks. And the slamming incidence, a slamming incidence of 50%, is considered excessive and may lead to damage or injuries to the crew. So I'll put a link to this help article. It's really terrific. And let's look at those wave numbers regarding this particular passage. So we'll go to waves, and I've set up a new spreadsheet. So the PWG looked very difficult as far as waves go. So I can copy this, and I can post it in a new spreadsheet that has this data. So you can just paste it in here. I've color-coded it because I'm a very simple person and it's easy to look at these colors. I have the steepness there, and you can see for me this is getting kind of unacceptable. Other than that, it's pretty good, but at the end of the trip it gets very bad again. And here's the new data. Roll going up to 4.74. It's red above 4, or turning red, and vertical acceleration is red above 0.2 Gs. There's no slamming incidents. So just looking, I mean, there's a lot of red here and a lot of yellow, so it's not looking very good. Now I can do the same thing with the ECMWF and take a look at how that looks. I've pasted the ECMWF data in here, and there's only one incidence where the roll gets up to 4 or close to 4. Other than that, this is all green and doesn't look too bad at all. Even my steepness factor is always above 50. Except for right down here at the very end of the trip. Ignore this down here. That's just extra formulas with no data. So again, I'll put this spreadsheet on our website so that you can download it if you want. But I spend so much time talking about waves, I don't want to neglect the other stuff. So let's go to the summary and take a look and see how this passage looks. 6 days, roughly 6 days everywhere, with an average speed that concerns me a little bit. ECMWF has an average speed of 6.15. That's 148, 149, 150 mile days. We generally don't do that consistently, so I'm worried that that's a little bit fast for us. Motoring time of a day on ECMWF, don't mind that at all. PWG, with the higher winds, had more motoring time, so it goes right through that high pressure area. I'm going to look at maximum gusts, 22, 19, 22. So maximum gust is about 20. That's not bad. Maximum CAPE, the convective available potential energy, or the likelihood of squalls, is very low. And there's some more new data here. Time upwind and greater than 15 knots is 1 and 2% on the PW models. And this is a little bit concerning here. Time wind against current with the current greater than a knot and the wind greater than 12 knots is on these models about 10%. Even on ECMWF, it's 9%. So when the swells are going in the opposite direction of the current, the seas get very, very steep. And that's 9% of the time for this passage. That's a little bit concerning. I still think we're going to take this passage because I think it actually looks pretty good. If we look at the wind now, and again, I'm going to look at ECMWF because it's my habit to do that, and I'm not saying it's great. Here's a little bit on the beam. Remember, with apparent wind, that's going to go forward of the beam. But most of this is behind the beam, comfortably behind the beam. Motoring, comfortably behind the beam. That's looking pretty good to me. It's only the waves that are questionable, and they're questionable with the roll right here at the beginning of the trip on the afternoon that we leave. And that's about it. So let's take a look at the map for ECMWF right when we leave. So it's a little bit upwind. Now, this is going to be inside the reef here, and I'm not sure what pass will be going out. I don't know if we'll be going as far as it says. But here's the time that's kind of questionable for waves. Let's look at the wave data. I just don't see anything that's very bad here. The wave height is 1.7 meters at 7.6 seconds. The seas do get a little steeper, and they're getting down to my limit. But it's interesting how that corresponds with roll, because we're beam on. So the roll gets higher there. So you see how these numbers kind of work together. Although the PredictWind version with roll, vertical acceleration, and slamming is light years ahead of what I did with steepness. All in all, I'd say this is looking like a pretty good passage. So how do we set this up? Well, it's in routing preferences, and we go to wave polar. And first thing to do is enable wave polar here with this switch. And I entered the boat's parameters here versus use predefined boat dimensions, which it says is not recommended. The length of the waterline, the displacement, the beam, and the draft. Now, be aware that draft is not what you'd normally use for the draft of your boat. It's the draft of the hull excluding the keel. So for us, it's only 0.6 meters. And I scaled that off of one of the drawings of our boat. You'll also notice that I have fastest time selected because Comfort was taking us all around New Caledonia, and we're not going to do that. So if we go back to boat polar, you'll notice another change I made. I checked the checkbox that says tidal and ocean currents. Now, the wave polar stuff is only available on the professional edition, but I just want to plead with you to get that. Think about it. If you break one thing on your boat, what's the likelihood that it's going to be any less than $500? Think of this as insurance. And this is an amazing tool to have this wave data to be able to judge how comfortable a passage is going to be. This might be the difference between being miserable for a week and having a really enjoyable time sitting in the cockpit, watching the ocean, catching fish. It just could be all the difference in the world. And isn't that worth the price of the PredictWind professional subscription? I really think it is. Now, I'm not affiliated with PredictWind. I am a fanboy. It's not sponsored at all, so this is just from the heart. It's really worth it. The professional version with this new wave data is absolutely incredible. I think that's pretty much all I have to say on the subject. I really think we're going to take this window on Tuesday. I'll check it out every day between now and Tuesday and see how it evolves. But it's looking pretty good to me, pretty possible. See you in episode 6.